Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. There's more information on our website, womensdeclaration.com, where you'll find our Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, which has been signed by 37,003 people from 160 countries and is supported by 517 organisations. We have volunteer activists, including country contacts from every continent, and we engaged in defending women's rights. Do join us. You can help us and help promote the declaration, which is the aim of Women's Declaration International, by donating. We'll put some links up about donating or volunteering, becoming an activist with us. And there's also a member category, so you can become a member. So I'm really pleased to say that today we have Daniela Danna from Italy, and she's going to talk about the gender package, how the Italian gay and lesbian movement has ended. We also have Branka Petrov from Serbia, who's going to talk about the ontology of gender. And then we have Jade, Whitehouse, and these final two are pre-records, so they're recorded from the recent Australia and New Zealand webinars. She's going to give news from the Women's Rights Network Australia in Sydney, and then Tanya Sturt from New Zealand, Standing for Women New Zealand. We're going to go to our first speaker now, Daniela Danna from Italy. She's got a PhD in sociology and social research. She's currently a researcher at the University of Salento, inspired by world systems analysis. Daniela is an author, among other scientific contributions, of 2 English books, Contract Children, Questioning Surrogacy by Ibidem, or published by Ibidem, 2015, and Procreation and Population in Historical Social Science, Anthem Press, 2021. And she is going to talk about, or Daniela Danna is going to talk about the gender package, how the Italian lesbian and gay movement has ended. So thank you so much, Daniela, for coming, and over to you.
My presentation is from somebody who's been a part of gay and lesbian movement since the 90s, the early 90s. And then this has morphed into something else. The terminology LGBT came to Italy with the World Pride that was organized by ILGA in 2000 in Rome. There was a huge demonstration, and then there was the Congress of the ILGA organization. And from that moment on, the gay and lesbian movement started going downwards and adopted the gender package, of which I will be speaking in a moment. I wanted first to say something more general. The case of Italy is actually just one of the many countries where this blueprint of what I call the gender package has been pushed, apparently from below, but in fact from above. As Joe Brew has described, it is a new operating system for patriarchy with the cancellation of sex, female erasure, that is not stemming from the acknowledgement of transsexual or transgender people, but it is much broader in scope. It is the idea that man, thanks to his technology, can master nature, even his own nature, and morph it into what fits his mind. It's the division between res cogitans and res extensa that Cartesio did back in the 17th century, the thinking substance, the mind, and the thing that is occupying space, matter, body, which must be mastered by the mind. According to Claudia von Berloff, the German ecofeminist, it's an alchemic project. This is also, she has written extensively about this, about how patriarchy has always had this goal of mastering nature, of substituting nature with something presumably better, which is technology, and becoming what human beings want to be by design, men want to be by design. And this fits also with what Mary Daly has written in her analysis. And nowadays, we can call it transhumanism. This is the label that the most fits this kind of thought that has been, that can be seen back in the centuries. Martin Rothblatt, for example, who's a CIO in pharmaceutical industries and a transsexual from man to his idea of woman, says that we need this freedom of getting into whatever shape we want, the freedom of form, she calls, or he. And the cultural industry is contributing to this. We have had this deluge of postmodernism in Italy as well, starting from the 90s, mid-90s. We have had all the translations of Judith Butler's work, for example, and her skeptical idealism. Also, I'm referring to idealism in the philosophical sense of this distinction between the life of the mind, the ideas, and the material. And before starting the session, we were speaking about Marxism. Of course, it's materialism is what Marx has, is a philosophical transition opposing the idealism that Marx has connected himself to. So as I'm a sociologist and I'm not a postmodernist. I stick to what I call a materialistic analysis and a scientific method. So scientific methodology, I don't want to speak extensively about this. I'll speak more about Italy, but I want to give a framework of what my analysis is of what is happening. So I'm inspired by an anthropologist, Marvin Harris, who wrote in 1979, Cultural Materialism. Again, we are seeing this contraposition to idealism. And he has differentiated two fields for the social science: the study of the culture and the interpretation of social facts, which is subjective. This is when people in Italy say, oh, but surrogacy is a gift. The woman who's making a child and then as a gift to somebody else, they accept this gift and the money is only for her expenses. So this is a very subjective view. And if you study the behavior and the physical occurrences, and then we go to the objective side, of course, there are methodological problems in as much as we don't have a complete overview of what is happening. So it's always an attempt. Science is not fixed. Science is a method to get to know the world. But it exists. If we did not have knowledge of the world, then we won't be able to survive from day to day. This is also something that we know, what we need to eat, what is bad for us, and everything. So the objective side is what human beings can strive to. Of course, we are never sure whether it's objective in reality, but this is an endeavor. And then we look at the behavior and physical occurrences, the separation of mother and child, and the passage of money, and we call it buying and selling. And then I put into in the last part, we have the terminology of Marvin Harris, is emic and ethic, that comes from phonemic and phonetic. So what the speaker is putting as a particular meaning into the phrases that the speaker is uttering, and phonetic, which is how the language is constructed. What are the sounds that we need to make to form words that have meaning in the different languages. And then we made against surrogacy, when was it, in 2017, 18, There was a group of Italian academics, only women, that we also made a conference, and from that conference we wrote a book called Mater Iuris. That was also the name of the group. The book came out in 2020. We took a stand against surrogacy and against also other instances of violence against women. I proposed to the group, and it wasn't really an elaboration of the group, it was my personal elaboration of speaking about ethics based on relationships. So that the woman who, even in countries where there are laws that allow this selling of newborns, the relationship is what the mother has. And if she changes her mind, she must be allowed to change her mind. Plus, we don't find it ethical to buy and sell human beings. I wanted to mention also Martha Feynman as an inspiration, who wrote The Neuter Mother, the Sexual, there's a typo, Family and Other 20th Century Tragedies, who's also elaborating on the idea that the sexual family based on the sexual act is something that should be substituted by the dyad of mother and child, which is for her, and she writes a whole book to explain this, is the essential family. Also, Tazi Breve in Austria has elaborated on this idea, coming back to matriarchal reasoning. So, a couple of examples of ethics based on relationships. Mater semper certa est is Latin. It means the mother is always certain, and it is a legal principle that has been diffused in all countries before the laws were allowing for the selling of commissioned newborns, also known as surrogacy. Mater semper certa est means that you give the legal title of mother to the woman who has given birth. And pater ist quem nuptiae demonstrant. The father is demonstrated by the marriage, because the father can never be sure. So this is what in ancient Rome the legal framework was. And also I propose, based on relationships, to substitute the latter with the pater est quem mater demonstrat. So the mother should have the legal right to indicate the other parent. That can be a woman, that can be a man who's not biologically the father of the child, or in most cases the companion of the woman who might have married him, as in about 50% of the cases of newborns in Italy and in other Western countries now. So this is the framework. So the gender package promoted not by the gay and lesbian movement, of which I was part, by LGBT+, which is in most of the documents, the political documents that are elaborated in the different cities that are hosting pride marches. They get, if not the whole list, at least some of them, of these items that I will show and comment. And they never say anything in favor of declining these possibilities. No? If they, so what I'm saying is that the pride documents in the Italian cities, sometimes they don't mention these items, not all of them, but when but they never say something against. So most it's not only LGBT plus movement, of course, that is promoting these items, which I call the gender package. I call it the gender package because it is spearheaded by this queer or LGBT plus movement, starting from gender studies, the idealistic philosophy of which Judith Butler is prominent today. And this is it's a proposal, actually. This is, I have not written extensively under the label gender package. It's controversial. In Italy, I debated with a fellow feminist, Cecilia Lagna, who might be online. And she's saying, I call it the queer positions, because we have a strong opposition by the right wing and the church in Italy, the Catholic Church, against what they call teoria gender, so gender theory. And Cecilia doesn't want to be confused with this position. Since this is an international audience, I think we can use it gender, because this is the word that has been which meaning has been rewritten by Judith Butler and the queer movement, and now LGBT plus movement. But it's not only something that comes from a movement. And I must also add that most of the people who come to Pride marches, they have no idea. They do not really fight for all of these items. Maybe there's been a long fight about surrogacy, and the LGBT movement is very much in favor. But the other items are not so debated in the movement itself. So I don't want to use the queer as a label, because many people, young people, identify as queer, and they do not stand for these items. It's just a personal identity. They don't want to be called lesbians if they're women, because this is a bad word, even in Italy today. So I prefer the LGBT plus, also because nobody can really identify as LGBT plus. You're either a lesbian or a gay or a bisexual or transsexual or queer, no? Which is in a contraposition to all the other labels. The universities, the cultural industry, the Democratic Party that is now led since a few months by Elly Schlein, who is a strong supporter of all of this. And then all the movements at the radical left, like squatters, anarchists, that are very much motivated, and they are those engaged in attempts to silence us, radical feminists, lesbians, feminists who don't want to accept all these items. So most relevant to Women's Declaration is the self-ID, what they call. So men can legally be women if they declare so. And I put into parentheses and bold letters what they call it. So self-ID as a positive concept. And then they call GPA, gestation for others, in the Italian shortening, when children are commissioned and bought and sold. We can call it surrogacy, but now I created another acronym in Italian. Instead of GPA, I call about so CNC, the commission of the selling of commissioned children. GPA, of course, is very neutral. It's they don't even use gravidanza, which is the pregnancy, which has some flesh and bone in it. They use a gestazione, which is a medical term, and they want to introduce this into law. Renouncing sexual autonomy should be a job called sex work, is a buzzword that has been introduced since many years in Italy from the academy. I also was in this framework, and I have also written in Italian about this period that where I was not really a strong supporter, but I was accepting the idea that you can call prostitution sex work, and it might be for some people a legitimate job. Then we get to the trans minors, they call them. There's no
Daniela,
yes.
Just because of being clear in English, that you do not continue to believe that sex work is a job.
No, I don't.
No. It's just because
I have written about how I got. I started as a radical feminism in my PhD that was on prostitution policies. Then I was caught up by colleagues and socialized as to believe that this could be a choice. Then I read Rachel Moran.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we were talking
about
when
it came out in Italian, and then I was thinking that I was a fool, and I wrote about that too. How fool I was.
Brilliant. Thanks.
So this is public in Italy. So the trans minors is when minors are subject to medical experience with drugs that are used off-label to fix their so-called gender dysphoria. And I also engaged in what is gender dysphoria. I made an article for a scientific journal that is called About Gender. And then I learned that activists and also colleagues wanted to take it back. They wanted the journal to take it back. But the editors stood for it, and this is an article showing that gender dysphoria doesn't make sense really. Its definition in the diagnostic manual for mental conditions, it doesn't make sense. And then the final nail in the coffin of the gay and lesbian movement, homosexuality is the same gender attraction. This is something, as I told before, not many people are really aware of. It's not in the Pride documents even, but it is in ILGA principles, the Yogyakarta principles. They use this horrible abbreviation SOGI, the sex orientation and the gender identity, to clump together questions about homosexuality that in fact should not exist anymore, because if it's same gender attraction has nothing to do with what your material sex is. So we go back to Marvin Harris and the analysis of a material reality. So this is the situation for those goals of the LGBT plus academy plus the Democratic Party, left-leaning parties, which are also divided, because in the Democratic Party there are Catholics that are really at odds with all these new patriarchal gender contract. But the leadership is now pushing for these things. So the self-ID has been recognized by tribunals, and we don't have a legal system that is based on precedents, but still it means that if you have a good lawyer, you can get your self-ID. And this is against the sex change law that was introduced in 1982, where you need to be at least enlisted, approved for a sex change, that nobody's taking you, dragging you from your house to have a sex change by the surgeon, but you have lived 2 years. It puts a lot of hurdles, and now it's been interpreted in a way of recognizing self-ID. That would be introduced in law by the law proposal by Alessandro Zan, who's a gay member of the Democratic Party. The law was against homo, bi, transphobia. You can notice the lesbians are nowhere to be seen. And there was also a provision against discrimination against women, but also no misogyny was mentioned. And gender discrimination, with all the package that is speaking, this new speak of gender instead of sex. But it was defeated in 2021 when the Draghi government, sustained by all the parties but for Meloni, the Brothers of Italy, was voted with a secret vote. So members of the Democratic Party were against it. They could vote against it without going against the party discipline. And there was, in Parliament, there was an attempt to approve this law against the homo bi transphobia, leaving aside self-ID, because many feminists, many women were expressing themselves publicly against it. But Zan was adamant not to make any compromise. So I'm saying this because this shows also how this package is coming from English-speaking countries, from the center of the world system, the US, from the Biden administration, and it's really, it must be approved in full in order to change the social reality. But it was defeated. The Democratic Party city government of Milan, approved a register for the recognition of the gender of choice. This is also against the law. This is an administrative act that cannot go against national laws, but they did it as a virtue signaling, as showing where the progress is. We must go where all the other countries are going. So they approved this. It was promoted in particular by a trans member of the city administration, but it's not implemented yet. I don't think they can legally implement it, especially not with a right-wing government as we have nationally now. Then GPA, the gestation for others. We have a question about the birth certificates, and this is the goal of Rainbow Families Association, of which I was part when it started in 2005, because I did some research on lesbian mothers, not because I'm a parent, I'm not. But they invited me to join the association, and out of solidarity, I did it. And then they kicked me out because I was against surrogacy. So now Rainbow Families Association wants the legal recognition of birth certificates issued abroad that don't mention the mother. This is very much against the principle that I mentioned before, mater semper certa est. Even in adoption cases now, there is a record of who the mother is. It might not be on the public certificate that is given to the adopting parents, but the public must keep trace of who the mother is, and the mother must express her will to relinquish the child. It's not possible to have birth certificates not mentioning the mothers. But some mayors, left-wing mayors, have tried to recognize them, and there are legal cases now. It's mixed. You can get judges that are in favor and judges that are not. So it's an ongoing battle. But the government is proposing to prosecute surrogacy, which is prosecuted now. And the article of the law about artificial reproduction that is mentioned in surrogacy is not very clear. The other part is interpreting it as saying that even the parents can be prosecuted. I personally and others think that it's only its organization, the advertisement, publicity that you can make for that is prosecuted. So this proposal by the Meloni government has been approved by one chamber, and now is back to the other chamber. Wants to make this article more sharp in prosecuting what happens abroad, but it's not prosecuted now because there are Italian lawyers that are part of the LGBT movement that are organizing surrogacy for for couples that is happening abroad, but they are organizing it from their law studios in Italy, and they are not persecuted, for example. So it's all it's a kind of puppet show, you know, and nothing happens really in reality. So what they call sex work, I use this expression because this is the legal goal of LGBT, of the gender package assumed by the LGBT and also by Non una di meno, for example, Ni una menos. It's the Italian translation of a movement that is sort of inspired by what happened a few years ago in Latin America, but they call themselves trans feminists. So they are for the gender package in all its entity, and they've taken at heart this part about legalizing what they call sex work. But since 1958, when the brothels were closed in Italy, we still have the same law, which is an abolitionist law. It's interpreted in a way that is not so, it could be more used more against traffickers within Italian territories, and this never happens. The debate has introduced this term, lavoro sessuale, or even sex work in English. It sounds better when it's something it sounds more progressive when it's in English. And the debate is mostly about how to separate what is a trafficking and what is a chosen prostitution. And also they try to make sex work legal through the idea that disabled men need sexual assistance. So there are some sexological associations who are offering this diploma for something that is not legal, of course. You cannot be a sexual assistant, but there are people who have been to the courses, they learn how to be a sexual assistant, and have got their diplomas, and they're pushing for this figure to be legally recognized. Last item is trans minors. This is also something that doesn't exist. I put it as the buzzword that is used. And actually, even in Italy, there's a growing number of minors since about a decade. And now they're about 100 a year. They are treated in few, I don't remember whether it's 5, 6, something like that, half a dozen health centers in big cities. Since 2017, triptorelin, which is, I think it has the same principle as Lupron. Lupron is more famous, is used abroad, but the trademark triptorelin has been authorized by the medical authorities, the pharmaceutical authorities in Italy. And of course, there's a huge debate about it. And I finish by mentioning that also in Italy, we have an association of parents who are doing a wonderful job. They have a wonderful website to inform. They are allied with the transgender trend. They are writing in first person, but the situation, as in other countries, is that they have to be anonymous. They don't want to endanger their relationships with their kids, and there is, as in other countries, attempts to silence people, to cancel venues. Archilesbica has been, which is the National Association for Lesbians, who took a stand against surrogacy in 2016, if I can recall correctly. They are stripped of venues when they want to make a public talks. And now, latest news, both Archilesbica and in the local branch of UDI, which used to be the women's section of the Communist Party, and now it has survived as an independent feminist association. They have a women-only membership, and this means they cannot be in the public register for associations in the most progressive region in Emilia-Romagna, in the place around Bologna. because they are not open to men. So this is already also in Italy considered a discrimination. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so we're going to go to our next speaker, and I'm delighted to say that our next speaker is Branka Petrov. She's from Serbia. She's a PhD student of philosophy, a feminist activist, and she is going to speak on the ontology of gender. And Branka, we're having a highly intellectual feminist question time today, so it's quite hard for us to keep up. Will you tell us what ontology is, when just for anybody, because some of us don't know what ontology is, but in your talk. But thank you so much for coming, and over to you.
Ontology, in short, is the field in philosophy that deals with what being is, like what is something, how something comes to be, right? So whatever you have, if you want to know the essence of it, you're already on the field of ontology, right? If you ask about essence of thing. Now, my presentation is going to be the fragments of my PhD research. And now when I say this, I'm already reminded of this movie, Midsummer, when, actually not movie, but when the director Ari Aster was asked about why he make movie about PhD students. And he said, you know, when you want to make sure that what you're saying is not important, just say it's part of your PhD research. Like, this is guarantee, no one cares about that. But anyway, yeah, because this is a feminist panel, I hope someone will find it interesting. I will restrict this whole presentation to one question. My question is, what is gender? What is the essence of gender? I do not offer any solution farther than that, because as a feminists, we are, especially today, we are met a lot with this question, and we talk a lot about gender ideology and this idea that we need to smash patriarchy, smash gender ideology, destroy gender should not exist, etc., etc. But somehow, when we are confronted with gender, we are confronting with something solid, something that it exists. And even I find myself, when I see men cosplaying as a woman, I recognize him as a woman, even though I know it's ideology, and I see him that way only because there is this social pressure or social ideology that I should see women certain way and men certain way. But even though I know all that, I still somehow my emotional state is such that I don't see him the same way I see men who cosplays as a masculine man, etc. So obviously, and not only that, but if we say that gender is ideology, plain and simple ideology, history, so many ideologies come and go, and it is in nature of ideology that it is product of time, and with time it disappears. But gender, somehow, what we see, it persists. It is, whatever it is, and it exists, and we are confronted with material. It creates problem, it produces reality, it is a reality. So if it is, even as an ideology, it still is. So what is it? This is the question that we need to ask, because if we want to smash it or to destroy it, we need to know what we are destroying, right? And with this, if we ask this question, what gender is, we are on the field of ontology. We ask philosophical ontological question. I will draw upon terminology, a little bit terminology of Martin Heidegger, who is controversial figure in philosophy, but I'm not going to deal with his controversy. I will just borrow some of his terminology. So I will start with ontology as such, with short history of ontology, and then I will come to the problem of gender. Let's say first, in ancient times, there was idea that there is a subject and there is an object. An object exists independent from subject. And if subject is to understand what object is, it needs to have a certain methodology with which it will finally understand what this object is that exists. Even without subject, it exists as such. And this is the ontology of Plato, this is ontology of pre-Socrates and Socrates philosophy of Aristotle in the whole ancient time. Then in modern times came the switch. where it is said there is this idea that object exists independent from the subject. We cannot accept this idea anymore. The subject is constitutive to the object. This is the idea that only through the lenses of subject that sees, that confronts this object comes to have a meaning. Without the lenses of subject is just a fact, just a natural occurrence. It has no meaning, right? For something to have a meaning, for object to have a meaning, it has to be confronted with subject. So the world that exists for the subject is the world of subject and not world of the object. And only when subject confronts the object, it has this, and this is what is in phenomenology, what is called phenomenon, right? Phenomenon is object as seen through the lenses of the subject. So not natural fact, not natural occurrence, but only in this relation of subject and object. And then in 18th, 19th century, and it prolonged in 20th and 21st century, came and became popular the idea of historicity. Historicity is the idea that not only that the subject creates the object only exists for the subject, but also the idea that object exists through history. So this idea that development, but we don't have to define development as progressive force. That whatever we define the development, this idea that object exists in time is constitutive to this object. We cannot think of object outside of time, outside of history, outside of historicity. And this historicity, this is the subject perspective, because human is historical, subject is historical being. And so there was philosopher, some call them father, whatever that means, father of phenomenology, who wanted to radicalize this idea. And he said, so there is this absolute historicity that is last transcendental principle, that all the validity of the world, all the truth of meaning of the world, of the human world, if it's to be sourced, it needs to be sourced from this transcendental principle of historicity. So anything that exists in this historicity. And in his words, he said the historicity is structure of being. So being, and this being, this is the transcendental, absolute transcendental subjectivity. So his philosophy is philosophy of subjectivity. Anything that exists. Anything. If we are to define anything that exists, we need to go back to this transcendental principle of historicity. And now we are coming to what is important to us, and where I'm going to draw from infamous Heidegger. He came and he said, it's not that being is structured historically, that historicity is the structure of being. It's that being is time, being is history. He put this equation there. And with this, because with Husserl, we had subject confronted with this objective world, needed to, from this absolute historicity, it needed to constitute meaning, to constitute reality. Subject constitutes this world that it projects in front of itself. But with Heidegger, when he put this equation between being and time, what he said is, we are not talking about constitution, because constitution implies a relation between subject and object. So you are in relation with this object. Before that, before any engagement of subject in the world, there is already some structure before that, and this is the what he calls Dasein. This is a German word. There is not good translation, but it is the being here. This is the specific situation of human, and what he calls human. The situation of human is that it is thrown into the world. So your thrownness into the world is already pre-structure of your understanding. So if you are to engage with this world, you can only engage as this thrown thing. And as a thrown thing, before you even have any understanding, you're already thrown as something. You already are meaning. So it's not that you give meaning to the world, you already are meaning as such, with this being thrown in the world. And this pre-structure of understanding, this is how he calls it. In this pre-structure of understanding, there is certain factors. He calls it factors, content, and I will name. He names, I think, more than 3, but I will name the most important 3 factors that are the content of this pre-structure of understanding. So it is labor, because as human, you are predestined to create. You cannot, even animals create sometimes, but human cannot live like animal. You have this predisposition to labor, to create. So you're already, before you have any engagement with the world, with objective world, you already are determined by this predisposition to work, to labor. The second one is language. Human has predisposition for language, and this is very important for those modern linguists of 20th and 21st century, who tend to reduce philosophy to just language. I am not on this side. I don't belong there, analytical philosophy. And then third, which is going to be important here for me, for us, is being tied to body, to corporal body. And those are 3 most important factors of this pre-structure of design, pre-structure of understanding of design. Now, Heidegger, because he considered man universal subject, he didn't even come to think that it's not only that we are tied to a body, but we are also tied to essentially different bodies, right? Male and female. And Heidegger, of course, didn't think of that, and no male philosopher thought of that, but it is also. So not only we are determined by being corporal, but also we are determined by being corporal in 2 different ways. And when we act in the world, when we engage in the world, we engage already determined to see the world from the perspective of being corporal in certain way, in 2 different ways, right? Now we'll go back to this language as also pre-structure of understanding, and I will go to another philosopher, Karl Otto Appel. He's more contemporary. He passed away maybe 5-6 years ago, something like that. He was linguist, and what he wanted to do with Heidegger philosophy was that he tried to, because for Heidegger, for Husserl and for Heidegger and for this whole tradition, they were still in the realm of transcendental subjectivity. So this design is individual, it's a subject. So as a throne, it's individual subject in the world. So what Karl Otto Appel wanted to show was that it's not individual subjectivity that is transcendental principle according to which meaning is created, but it's because meaning for individual, there's no meaning. Just individual is natural fact. If you don't belong to community, there's no meaning around you. For meaning to be created, there needs to be community that decides this meaning, and there needs to be consensus about meaning. For anything in the world to have meaning, there needs to be community, not just individual. Individual does not exist as human. So he said this transcendental principle is not transcendental subjectivity, but transcendental intersubjectivity. So what he calls ultimate transcendental principle, that all meaning needs to be sourced from, ultimately, is what he calls the communication community. Community of that which is humanity as such, limited to academia because the world is not perfect, but ideally it's humanity as such. And this I find very important, because I would agree with this idea of intersubjectivity being ultimate transcendental principle. But then if we apply, and we can do that because I'm not linguist like Karl Otto Appel, I can apply this same transcendental principle of intersubjectivity to this being tied to a body, to corporality, then what we have is, if we have two different bodies as the determinant for our being in the world, male and female body, but as such we exist just as natural fact, right? But the moment with our bodies, when we have to act in the world, when we have to engage with the world, we are in the field of intersubjectivity. And this is the field of gender. So I would argue that gender, equally as sex, is ontological category and cannot be demolished like, because there's no, biology is just natural fact, like tree growing in my garden is natural fact. The moment humans have to interact in the world, they're in the field of intersubjectivity, and this is where gender is created. What I'm not arguing for, that gender should be worshipped or whatever. What I'm arguing here for is that, yes, there is gender ideology, but there should not be equation between gender and gender ideology, because gender is ontological category, and there happens to be this ideology, gender ideology, that feels this category. So we fight against ideology, but that does not mean that gender should or could be destroyed. Gender is a matter of intersubjectivity as such, and we cannot exist other way than intersubjectively.
This is going to be Jade Whitehouse.
Tonight, I just want to give a brief overview of the Women's Rights Network Australia before updating everyone on our activities, campaigning against two bills tabled by Sydney Independent MP Alex Greenwich. This is just a little agenda, so I'll speak briefly about the conversion ban bill, but mainly about the equality bill. Give a bit of a summary on some points that we're really focusing on, and then discuss how we're trying to get this information out to the broader public. So just first, a bit of an overview about WRNA. We are a sister organisation modelled on the WRNA organisation founded by Heather Billing in the UK. We have a loose and collaborative connection with Women's Rights Network in the UK, but we're a homegrown Australian organisation. We campaign for sex-based rights in Australia. We started in April 2023, so our anniversary is the 28th of April. We now have 70 members, growing rapidly, and we're very active across different states. We've had a few little wins, including a "What is a Woman?" question to Julia Gillard by certain members, which led to some trending on Twitter for a few days. And we had a very successful Fair Women's Sport campaign at the time of the World Cup in August. But what's happening in New South Wales, Australia? Alex Greenwich, MP, gave notice of the Equality Legislation Amendment LGBTIQA+ bill on the same day as 8 gender-critical women were presenting in the New South Wales Parliament in a session called "We Can't Talk About Sex." He posted this shot to Twitter on that same day. A secretive drafting process developed this bill. Alex Greenwich called for community consultation in 2022. However, only a number of broad themes were open for comment. The bill was described as a comprehensive omnibus bill to address all legislative barriers to LGBTIQA+ health and well-being. Despite repeated requests for access, the text of the bill was not made available until they were tabled on the 24th of August. On that day, Alex Greenwich thanked a number of pro-trans activists and charities in his second reading speech, including the staff at Equality Australia, ACON, the Gender Centre, Intersex Human Rights Australia, PIAC, the Public Interest Advocacy Centre, and the political party, the Greens. So introduced on the 24th of August this year, the Equality Bill, for short, amends 20 other acts, is a complex piece of proposed legislation that touches on complex, deep issues, and if passed, will have profound impacts on society in New South Wales. Also tabled on the 24th of August was Greenwich's Conversion Practices Ban Bill, banning both sexual orientation and gender identity conversion practices. WRNA supports a ban on gay conversion, but not a bill that mentions gender identity. New South Wales Labor ran a targeted consultation around the same time in August to develop their own conversion practice ban bill. So the New South Wales Labor Party had promised before the 2022 election to ban LGBTQI+ conversion practices as well. But they did not promise to bring in sex self-ID. That was not an election promise. As it appears, the New South Wales Labor Party are developing their own conversion ban bill. WRNA and other aligned groups are seeking to educate the MPs of the differences between LGB and TQ+. It is clear MPs do not understand the difference. So as we know, this sort of legislation is impacting the sex-based rights of women and girls, gays, lesbians, and bisexual people. It also harms culturally and linguistically diverse communities who are disproportionately impacted. Over the next few slides, I'll go into each of these points. There are 8 main areas of concern that WRNA have focused on. And there's an overview here. There are the 8. We have sex self-ID, allowing minors to transition, redefining sex and sexuality, encouraging sexual exploitation of women, encouraging the reproductive exploitation of women, restricting freedoms of expression, infringing the rights of government employees, and their impacts on government workplaces. So first, the Equality Bill seeks to bring New South Wales into line with the other states and territories of Australia by introducing sex self-identification, hence removing the requirement for medical interventions before permission to change sex descriptor on your birth certificate. The second issue of the bill that's related is that the sex descriptor identifier is not limited to changing from sex, changing your sex from male to female or vice versa. But there is a third option where you can indicate any other descriptor of sex, with the examples in law, including on the bill, agender, genderqueer, non-binary. So considering the nonsensical nature of this, we can have a cat gender, we can have a pup gender, we can have whatever we like in New South Wales. This is removing the binary nature of sex from law in New South Wales. The third point of alarm for women and girls is that the bill seeks to amend New South Wales laws to delete all offences relating to prostitution. This includes the crime of living on the earnings of prostitution, causing or inducing prostitution, or coercing a sex worker to give up their earnings. Other offences cover advertising, misuse venues, and solicitation. They'll all go. These changes would place New South Wales in breach of Article 6 of CEDAW. Parties shall take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to suppress all forms of traffic in women and exploitation of prostitution of women. And the fourth alarm that's raised because of this bill will make legal engaging in commercial surrogacy outside New South Wales, make it legal, and empowering the courts to issue parental orders to intending parents of children born from these arrangements. So thinking about the Greek surrogacy scandal. The fifth alarm relates to the bill seemingly removing the discrimination protection for people on the basis of homosexuality and replacing it with sexuality. So the definition homosexual means male or female homosexual is to be replaced with a definition of sexuality that includes homosexual, bisexual, and asexual, which is not a sexuality. This definition does not include heterosexuality. The sixth and seventh issues curb freedom of expression. The bill would criminalise outing somebody's sexual orientation or gender identity or sex worker status. Yes, the bill introduces protections for sex workers as an occupation. No other occupation is protected in this way. The bill introduces criminal personal violence for outing someone's gender history. This would apply to online communication such as Twitter or Facebook, making it a criminal offence to correctly refer to a male person as a man or a female person as a woman on social media. The bill also expands restrictions on flags, banners, and other political expression. So I think that our definition of woman t-shirts would be banned. It could criminalise a person whose partner has told them they are transgender and who wants to discuss this development with a trusted friend, relative, or counsellor. Seventh concern, the bill seeks to make amendments to a number of acts to allow transgender and intersex people to select the sex of a person carrying out a body search. It's compelling women to have to search a man who thinks he's a woman. No consideration for her rights in her employment. The law currently states that all searches on prisoners must be conducted by a person of the same sex. This bill will amend that provision to allow a person who says they are a transgender to select the sex of an officer who strip searches them. The transgender person doesn't need to have altered their sex descriptor or fulfill any other requirements. They can just simply assert at that point that they seek to live as a member of the opposite sex and will then have the right to be treated as such and compel a female police officer to search them. Finally, as if that's not enough, the bill seeks to amend the Government Sector Employment Act by inserting diversity targets and quotas for all New South Wales public sector agencies. There is no need for targets relating to the sexual orientation of employees, and there is certainly no need for affirmative action policies for males who say that they are female. The bill also seeks to make changes to the current eligible person category of identified jobs for people who belong to a particular group by adding intersex and transgender people as categories. This change would mean that there would potentially be roles in the public service in New South Wales only open to transgender people. One thing is clear from people who have been in discussion with different governmental representatives in New South Wales, all MPs across the aisle have a lack of understanding of foundational issues related to the proposed legal changes, such as the differences between LGB and TQ+, and the unpopularity of sex self-ID internationally. This is a screenshot from our respectoursex.org website. Women's Rights Network Australia are trying to help MPs have a greater understanding of the issues by publishing information on our website, respectoursex.org, and as this image shows, tooling people up to raise the issue directly by asking for a meeting with their MP. WRNA are also running social media campaigns on each misunderstood issue over the next 10 or so weeks. We need you all to please share these messages everywhere when you see them. You can help by contacting your MP and asking for a meeting to explain how significant these issues are. That will help school New South Wales Labor about the deep impacts these proposed laws will have. If you can't get a meeting, tell the receptionist. Email again, ring again. I only got a meeting with my local rep after 5 weeks of harassing his local and ministerial officers. And at that meeting, it was such a productive 1 hour of communicating the very big concerns of LGBT and women's rights. He did not know. He just did not know. And he's a minister in New South Wales. So when we think about the MP lobbying, this is the graph as to the distribution of our members in the lower house. We had a change of government last year. Up until then, Alex Greenwich did have balance of power, but there are now 11 independents on the crossbench. This means that New South Wales Labor do not generally rely on his support. We are raising the concerns with all members of both houses. However, we need New South Wales Labor to understand the dangers associated with legislating any aspects of these bills, i.e. both the Equality Bill and the Conversion Bill, because they may sever these bills and adopt individual policies under their own bills. Most likely, this will be potentially the case with sex self-ID. Labor committed to the New South Wales election last year of banning LGBTQI conversion practice. So we need to explain gay conversion is for banning, but not gender identity conversion. WRNA would support a gay conversion ban, obviously, but the inclusion of gender identity is a modern day gay conversion. We need to explain this. It's a heteronormative conversion of gender non-conforming individuals who would most likely grow up to be gay or lesbian if left alone. We need New South Wales Labor to understand this in the broader context around poor evidence and outcomes of gender-affirming care, especially in relation to minors. So to raise awareness and give people the tools to lobby their local reps in New South Wales Parliament, Women's Rights Network Australia have an online information webinar this week on Thursday night, 5th of October at 8 p.m. It's just for a short 50 minutes. We're encouraging everyone to register to learn about the bill and be given tools and confidence to raise the issues themselves. One initiative from the info session will be to provide attendees with postcards to post to the Attorney General, with the aim to clearly remind the Attorney General of New South Wales the sex-based rights of women. We have, so I'll just show you on the back of that card, you may not be able to read it. It says, women and children need New South Wales parliamentarians to stand up for them and protect their sex-based rights. Sex self-ID threatens the sex-based human rights of women and children in New South Wales and discriminates them based on sex. Sex self-ID creates a legal fiction where sex doesn't matter and ignores safeguarding principles. Sex self-ID insensitizes gender identity fraud. Defend our biological reality that our bodies make us vulnerable. Women and children cannot identify out of bodily vulnerability. It is based on our sex. Please defend our sex-based rights in law. So we have our website that is growing in content all the time. We have blogs about these various issues. We have a sex self-ID quiz. We have the names and addresses of all representatives in both houses of Parliament. The blogs provide deep dives into the issues, and we're constantly updating the website with more info and tools. So thank you for having us this evening. For further information, please do go to our website. We also have our home website, WRNaustralia.au. LGBTalliance.org.au have incredible material on their website, as does Afora. And here is a slide to leave you with that you can scan the registration form here to attend our seminar on Thursday night, or share it as you will. Thank you very much.